For the lip details, we're going to use another stamp. And specifically the pattern that the stamp achieves is the stretched wrinkles where the emphasis is more on the crease or the dark values in the stamp rather than the bumps out or the light values in the stamp. Compared to the skin wrinkles we've been using, the pattern is similar, but the values are different. This one bumps out too much. And so let's create a new brush texture. I'll go to the texture panel down here, and I'm not in sculpt mode, so let's jump over to sculpt mode. And we will duplicate this texture, call it Skin Wrinkles Lips. And let's load the file. This one here, Skin Wrinkles Lips. And we'll take a look at it. And also make sure to add a fake user to this texture. And then back to our brush settings. Okay, so the emphasis here is the darker values, and especially the long creases running horizontally, with a secondary pattern running vertically. And this achieves a very characteristic lip pattern. We can see it in these lips. If I maximize our reference images, you can see it here running vertically or perpendicular to the vermilion border. And pretty much all of the lips feature this pattern somewhere or in some fashion. All right, you see it a lot running perpendicular to the vermilion border. And we can do most of the lips with this single stamp. So let's get started. I've been favoring this reference primarily, but I also like to jump around and just get other perspectives from other reference images. Now, in order to sculpt this detail, I'm going to enable our shape key. So let's turn that to 1 so that we can sculpt with the mouth open. And then in our stamp brush, make sure that we select the skin wrinkle lip texture. Let's see what this looks like. We'll start on the bottom left with mirroring enabled and then make our way to the center. All right, so let's just draw a test texture to see what it looks like. Okay, so that's going to be a little too stretched. I must have the scale value stretching out our texture, which I do. Let's set all the values to 1 and try again. Okay, so that's the kind of texture that I'm after. It is a little bit strong, so I'll hit the escape key before finishing the stroke, Shift F, and let's go back down to our safe zone, which is like 0.2 for strength. And the general pattern for the upper lip, let's find a better image. This one shows it off pretty well, though it does vary from lip to lip, but generally we'll see the pattern stretched perpendicularly along the vermilion border on the top and bottom of the lip, and then in the center, it's rotated 90 degrees and going horizontally or parallel to the vermilion border. And this crisscross of the pattern is extremely characteristic of the lip. So let's roll with that formula, or really just a guidance rather than a strict formula. And let's start by dragging our vertical lines perpendicular to the vermilion border, trying to switch the direction at which I pull out the texture. So sometimes I'll go right along the vermilion border, sometimes I'll go left, slightly vary the scale of the pattern, make some smaller, some larger, just making our way up to the center where we will need to disable X symmetry. Let's go ahead and do that now and draw uniquely on each side. And then while I'm in the center, let's go ahead and do the horizontal or parallel orientation of this texture. All right, so where the textures overlap, that is more than okay. That kind of overlap is very important for this stamp to work properly and be realistic. Again, making some larger and some smaller. Let's re-enable X symmetry and finish off the horizontal orientation. And finally, for the bottom edge of the upper lip, we will return to a perpendicular orientation. However, usually on the bottom, it's a larger scale to the stamp. Sometimes larger depending on the specific set of lips. But let's start drawing that perpendicular once again. I'm going to make them a little bit bigger. And also maybe take down their strength a little bit to like 1.5 or 0.15, sorry. Disable symmetry and finish off the pattern. The reason I like to decrease the strength once I get to the interior edge of the lips is that typically that is a smoother, shinier portion of the lips. I suppose because it's closer to, the saliva from the inside of the mouth. And so the softer the stamp detail, the shinier the end result will be. Whereas once we get towards the outside surface of the lips, the detail's stronger. It's not usually quite so shiny unless the person just licked their lips. But generally speaking, that is the primary pattern of most people's lips. But keep in mind that it does change from person to person. Though on the upper lip, it is a little bit more formulaic. The bottom of the lip changes up a little bit. With this person, the horizontal pattern is not nearly as pronounced as the vertical pattern. So just be mindful. It's not a strict formula, but guidance to point you in the right direction. Now, the second layer of detail will take us back to the large wrinkle texture. Skin wrinkle big, I think we called it. Let's see that texture. This one I'm going to use for the large creases that we see emanating from the inside surface of the lip outward toward the vermilion border. All right, we're going to use this texture at a pretty large scale and fairly high strength, if I recall correctly. Let's go to like 0.25. And I will leave X symmetry off for this to keep it unique on both sides. I'm going to draw it very big, starting at the bottom edge and kind of stretching across the entire lip. Okay, so that started pretty well. I'm going to add another stronger stamp on this side. And maybe, let's see. Yeah, I think I was going to say the outside of the upper lip, but on this reference, it's more the outside of the bottom lip, not so much the upper lip. Let's see about this reference. Can't really tell the upper lip so much. This photo, we get a nice perspective of the bottom lip. But you can see where these wrinkles are kind of starting. I think I will draw one more on the bottom side. Let's see. Maybe stretch it out a little bit. Like, how about we go in Y this time, like 0.7. There we go. Just giving it some unique wrinkles. And I think I need to drag this parallel to the direction that I want the wrinkles to point. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. And this is just a start of the pattern. Now I'm going to go manually with my crease brush to define these creases a little more uniquely. Okay, so with my crease brush, let's make it pretty small. Hold Control. I think that's a little too strong. Let's bring it down to like 0.4. Make sure that my pin sensitivity is enabled so I can dynamically, using the pressure of my pin, control how deep the cut goes. So I'm focusing on a few existing creases that come from the stamp and just re-emphasizing them, similarly to how we did with the eye. And this adds that artistic touch so that it's not completely pattern-based. And that's going to finish off the upper lip very nicely. Now it's up to you how many of these you add. Some people don't have very many, but others have distinguished creases like this. I think on this person, yeah, you can see them pretty strong. Of course, that's on the bottom lip. On the upper lip, they're not quite so strong. So that's something to keep in mind for the bottom more so than the top. But just emphasizing a few of these wrinkles goes a long way. What you didn't see there is we got the silly bug after I saved the file. So I'll fix that after I finish sculpting the lips. I will simply disable the shape key because we'll get back to the regular mouth open, because remember that shape key data somehow gets baked into the multi-res, doubling the shape key effect. So I can finish sculpting here and then fix the glitch after the fact. So let's go back to my crease brush. And something else I wanted to say about the custom wrinkles or creases that we're further emphasizing is we can also use this opportunity to accentuate the tubercles of the lips, right? Where there's 3 on top, 2 on the bottom. So kind of emphasizing the middle by cutting this a little bit deeper with a larger crease brush. Just kind of pushing everything here inward a little bit. Doing the same thing over here. Yeah, I think that'll look nice. I think I'll cut one smaller wrinkle down the middle. This one doesn't really have existing stamp texture to follow. I'm just going to cut that in myself. I think that'll look pretty good. One thing I will warn about is I think these textures are pretty easy to get down and kind of fun. So before you know it, you can go way too strong with these wrinkles. So it's always a good habit to double check your reference, making sure you're staying within reason. And as I look at this image, there's also a fairly strong indentation running horizontally. So I might incorporate that as well with my crease brush, make it larger, and then lightly draw a horizontal detail kind of underneath the vermilion border, very subtle. But that subtle little ridge, or indentation rather, kind of emphasizes the vermilion border ridge. Also, something I like to do when I cut in wrinkles like this, obviously the crease brush is pushing inward, but nothing is pushing outward. So if you only do creases, you miss the other side of that where the volume pushes out in between wrinkles. And so to accomplish that, I'll jump back over to our regular draw brush, switch from the stamp to our sculpt draw behavior, and with a subtle strength, I can kind of puff out in between the wrinkles, okay? So I'm avoiding the actual creases, but just lightly pushing out in between, okay? This can be a great way to finalize these forms that we're creating, these subtle forms. Also touch up the vermilion border a little bit. Just push it out slightly and not uniform all the way around, but I'm just touching in certain spots as I go around, kind of like, I don't know, Morse code, so to speak, like dat, dat, dat. But the main point being you don't want to over focus on pushing inward or pushing outward. You want them to be balanced together. And I think we've reached a pretty good spot on the upper lip, though now that I'm zooming out, I realize I missed the detail on the philtrum, also the corner of the mouth. So let's switch back to our stamp brush and change our texture to be the pore texture. Make sure our strength is not too strong, back down to around 0.2. We'll just fill in the smooth spots, kind of blending with the skin texture. That'll work out well. And then for the philtrum, maybe increase the strength a little bit. And I might lay down a layer of this, kind of increasing the texture just on the vermilion border. There we go. I think that looks nice. Let's save our file. And for the bottom lip, I'm going to speed up the video playback because most of the process is the same as the upper lip. Beginning with the stretched lip wrinkle pattern in the corner, perpendicular to the vermilion border. However, as I approach the front of the lip, you'll see me hug the vermilion border and avoid the tubercle humps. Often these tubercles are smoother and shinier and don't need as much surface detail. So as I lay down the stamps, they will sort of surround the tubercles, emphasizing them and leaving them smooth. But I don't recommend leaving them completely smooth. A subtle big wrinkle stamp works well to give it some texture. Even inverting the stamp helps with a slight dry lip texture. Then it's back to the big wrinkles on the inside surface of the lip, followed by hand-drawn creases for emphasis. Remember that a very small crease brush is necessary for the finest creases. At this point, they're more like cracks visually. And finally, it's some bump out with the standard sculpt brush to balance the crease detail. Then it's time to save the file and fix the silly multi-resolution bug. Okay, with the silly bug fixed, here's a moment of truth where we've sculpted the mouth open, but how does it look closed? Let's turn off our shape key, cross our fingers, and yeah, I think that looks pretty good. I think we're ready to move on to the next part of the face.